All right. Great. Yeah, thanks, Natalie, for the introduction. I will get right to it. My talk is also about agency. I think this is a defining feature if you talk about politics and games, but I try a different angle this time. So who doesn't love agency? It is one of the defining features of video games, a part of their specific mediality. It gives us the feeling of being powerful and able to change the world, or at least the game world. It is also one of the key research interests in game studies since day one. Janet Murray already sees it as a central point in digital media or the computer in general. So she says, agency is a satisfying power to take meaningful action and see the results of our decisions and choices. We expect to feel agency on the computer when we double click on a file and see it open before us, or when we enter numbers in a spreadsheet and see the totals readjust. Very good examples, I think. However, we do not usually expect to experience agency within a narrative environment. But Mary sees the possibility for agency in narrative forms in digital media as well, and this leads us directly to games. Agency then, in the case of digital media, goes beyond both participation and activity. As an aesthetic pleasure, as an experience to be savored for its own sake, it is offered to a limited degree in traditional art forms, but this is more commonly available in the structured activities we call games. Therefore, when we move narrative to the computer, we move it to a realm already shaped by the structures of games. Often mingled, confused, combined with the terms interaction and interactivity, agency distinguishes video games, at least to some extent, from other media. It structurally informs the many hero narratives or god games most of video games try to be. A very widespread, partly escapist understanding of video games sees this as the main attraction of video games, but, and this is where my talk actually really begins, but what happens in the cases video games deny us our formerly given agency, limiting our possible vectors of power, of choice, of change? I think these moments of agency loss should be a focus of research because they tell us a lot, not just about video games on their own, but how we experience agency in general, and how established and conventionalized forms of media reception can be subverted and used as reflections on greater societal and political topics. But first, we have to widen our understanding of agency. Murray's short definition of agency is helpful, but it binds it on the technical affordances of media. However, agency is a concept and phenomenon with a wider range of views, as Martin Hughes shows. Agency is a condition of activity rather than of passivity. It refers to the experience of acting, doing things, making things happen, exerting power, being a subject of events, or controlling things. This is one aspect of human experience. So, really big picture. The other aspect of human experience is to be acted upon, to be the object of events, to have things happen to oneself or in oneself, to be constrained and controlled, to lack agency. As people are both actors and acted upon, the interplay between agency and context is a central issue. Therefore, agency is, as Sonny Andermahr et al., for example, put it, a crucial term in the theory of and practice of feminism, as indeed any politics. Even though I would not claim these different forms of agency are one and the same, I propose that there is a structural analogy between LUDIC agency and what I call political agency. And just to be precise here, I mean political with a big P, so political in a broader sense. This is based on the fact that society and games are both systems governed by rules in which players and people are afforded agency. This parallel allows ludic agency to be used as an analogy for political agency. Games can give players and their characters agency in a fictional world and society. But I think agency feeds into games' function as a media and technique of subjectivity in general too. The literary scholars Christian Moser and Regine Stretting state. And this is actually about games, play, and literature from the 18th century on, but I think it's especially interesting for video games. Indeed, games seem to offer themselves as a technique and medium for the exploration, testing, and shaping of our self-relationships, because in them, basic parameters that structure subjective experience can be set arbitrarily and can thus be arranged and changed individually. Space and time structures, but also the configuration of rules and choices. The specific setting of these parameters seems to be committed solely to the creation of play. As long as this purpose is fulfilled, they can be modified. Thus, they offer the possibility of breaking through the habitual routines and automatisms of everyday life, even by means of minimal, voluntary, and intentional shifts in the parameters of action, thereby creating new ways of relating to oneself and new insights into oneself. And they state games allow for alternative self-relationships, different from those of everyday routines, because their structures can apparently be modified at will, unlike the structures of everyday life. So this is a really big point they make. The understanding of game and play in modernity is, as it seems, already bound to this function, making ludic agency in itself inherently political. And this is really important because subjectivity is one of the core categories of modernity. You might even say it is one of the biggest meta-narratives we produced. However, what does that mean for the phenomenon of agency loss and agency restriction in games? They can be powerful tools. Since games as a medium of agency have accustomed players to have agency, restricting or denying them agency in games can be impactful experience, sometimes even unnerving or infuriating. It offers the possibility for people to feel in a relatively safe media environment how agency in the real world is not distributed equally among people, especially because of class, race, and gender. Even though society claims that we should all be treated as equal, we in fact are not. We all know that actually, but yeah, you know. Be it because of systemic racism, sexism, or classism, games can help us understand this. So let me show what I mean with 3 short examples with very different aspects. First, the short game Freshman Year by Nina Freeman from 2015 focuses on the protagonist's experience of sexual harassment in a college bar. Even though the mechanics of the game are very simple, point and click or visual novel style mechanics, we have agency. By suddenly taking away players' agency in the moment of harassment, the game exemplifies how sexual harassment and violence constrains power and agency of the victims. We as players sit there and cannot act, as the protagonist is frozen by fear herself. Even though Nina Freeman chose a minimalistic audio and visual style, the moment is powerful because we, as players, feel powerless. Even the mouse cursor as a symbol of our agency vanishes. After the intervention of a friend in the story, the game ends with the protagonist looking into a mirror with which it invites the players to self-reflect, you see on the right. My second example is, I hope a lot of people know it, I hope is Richard Hofmeyer's Card Life, one of the truly great independent games there is. It focuses on the powerlessness of a migrant worker in the US who has to work from paycheck to paycheck, away from his family and with limited language skills. The game translates every menial task of his work into a challenge on the player's side with redundant typing or button pressing tasks. So if you have to, you are the owner, in quotes, of a newspaper shop, and you have to open the shop, and every little menial task you have to push a button, and again and again and again and again. Every failure to fulfill his tasks turns into a considerable loss of income and therefore his ability to pay his rent, which can result in losing his job, his home, and for us to lose the game. However, even if players meet all the challenges, there is still no happy ending because of his migrant status and working class background. There is no magic escape. The options we and the protagonist have are severely limited, and they stay that way. The American dream and the neoliberal promise that we can become anything we want is just as a powerful illusion as ever. Work harder, hard worker. We won't get rich even though we finish all our tasks in record time, save our money, and deprive us of any comfort. The cards, so to say, were already dealt before we started the game. I'm really good at time. Oh, great. My third and biggest example is Life is Strange 2, especially episode 1. Donald's Life is Strange 2 puts us in the role of the two Latinx boys, Sean and Daniel Diaz, in a Trump America where discrimination and violence against minorities by neighbors, strangers, and the police are normality. Sean's and Daniel's agency is limited, and even crimes they didn't commit are attributed to them only based on their Latinx heritage. Even though normally, players' choices matter a great deal in the Life is Strange series. The game purposefully ignores some choices to show how a racist society is not fair but discriminatory, and that the agency of minorities is always restricted and precarious. As a concrete example, in the first episode, we have two situations which show this poignantly. First, after a confrontation with their racist neighbor's son, the cops are called. And even though their father Esteban tries everything to de-escalate the situation, nothing works. Their minority status and the inherent racism of the police is enough to leave Esteban on the ground, shot multiple times by a scared cop. There is no possibility for negotiating, as there was in similar situations in Life is Strange 1. The second situation makes this even clearer. Sean and Daniel are on the run and stop at a gas station. With little to no money in their pockets, players have the choice to beg for or steal food or buy just the bare necessities at all. But this choice doesn't matter too. Sean always ends up beaten and zip-tied to a pipe by the racist shop owner, something Alice Bell from Rock Paper Shotgun in her review called unfair. But this is not an oversight or a plot hole. It is intentional, and it shows especially a white audience's blind spot, as Gita Jackson puts it. And I quote, "For a split second, I thought to myself, well, that would never happen. Then I remembered the murder of Tammy Rice, a 12-year-old boy playing with an airsoft rifle on the playground. The police shot him dead. I remembered Trevin Martin, a 17-year-old walking home from the store with candy and a drink, who was killed by George Zimmerman. It does happen. People do look at brown and black bodies, especially brown and black men, and just assume that violence is necessary." And as we all know, we could put a lot of other examples in this list too. Putting us into their shoes, in the safe space of a game, lets us glimpse the experience where every interaction can become dangerous in the game's constant rhythm of discomfort, as Allegra Frank from Polygon puts it. With these very different examples, I hope I could show you how agency loss and restriction can be used as an impactful rhetoric device in games, and that our analysis of games should not only focus on the agency players have, but on the agency they are denied. Moreover, the parallels between ludic and political agency, as well as the inherently politicality of games as a technique of subjectivity, makes the idea games could be non-political even more moot than before. What we can and can't do in a game and reality is important, as, and this is my closing quote, is important, or as the Austrian music collective Die Schmetterlinge put it, let's see. It is the freedom of those who have as many choices as possible. If the laborer has as many choices as possible, it is the freedom of the laborer. If capital has as many choices as possible, it is the freedom of capital. Look around you, who has as many choices as possible, and you know whose freedom it is. Thank you very much.